Today we are reporting irregular expenditure of 19 billion. This 19 billion is primarily a function of us having gone as far back as 2012. Secondly, it's been a function of us shaking this cupboard so hard that all skeletons are coming out. We are not able to tell you today that all the skeletons have come out. We will continue to shake this cupboard. There may be more that would still have to come. So when you look at these results, just bear in mind we've had to go back to as far as 2012. However, we need to then decide. We don't have the whole decade here. We've got to start to address Eskom of the future, turning Eskom around. So we're in the process of requesting the Minister and the Minister of Finance in National Treasury that we must stop now. We must stop how far back we can go. Because we'll spend all this time trying to go back to, I don't know, 95 years ago or 2010, 1910. So we have to draw a line at a point. So we are of the view that we should spend our remaining time going forward trying to put into place credible, reliable systems that when it says this is irregular and how we comply with those. So with all this in mind, as I said, we have now had our attention centered on addressing through quick and decisive actions 3 critical issues: the governance-related matters, the funding to find neat solutions to address our liquidity issues, and as I said, releasing the delayed results. But whilst we've made significant progress in our view in terms of consequence management, governance controls, and executive leadership stability, the road ahead remains difficult as we sustain this recovery to transition for future growth. So it is also critical to contextualize then the audit review as I have given you. Whilst we as a board are disappointed that a qualified audit could not be avoided for this financial year, our view is that our challenges in their nature cannot be solved overnight. We are comfortable, though, that great strides have been made in our key focus area with a number of initiatives being set in motion to address these key issues in a sustainable manner. I'll come back to this point on the qualification, but first let me pick up the few things within our areas of focus. The board have intensified our cleanup campaign. Since our inception, we have seen several executives and staff members implicated in serious allegations and misconduct fall by the wayside. Some criminal proceedings have already been initiated. We continue to pursue wrongdoing and take corrective action. I believe that our commitment to improving our governance practices has in the medium term resulted in greater number of issues of irregularity and impropriety coming to light. Of course, key to this is achieving the objective is also a stable and a capable executive leadership. And as such, the appointment of Phakamani Hadebe as permanent group CEO was prioritized and finalized. The board has also resolved that the size, the functional diversity and complexity of the institution warranted a 3 top persons executive leadership, comprised of group chief executive, chief financial officer, and a chief operating officer. This culminated in the appointment of Jan Oberholzer as our chief operating officer, as announced recently. We are still in the process of appointing a CFO and believe that finding the right candidate is key, not only for the stabilization and restoration, but also for the design and execution of our strategy for the future. At this point, let me assure you that we do believe that the current acting CFO is perfectly correct, is right, is doing the job that needs to be done. So in our view, the priority had to go into the operational side, which is why we sort of brought forward the issue of the COO. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the improvement in Eskom liquidity position, the organization continues to face significant financial and liquidity challenges. In the short to medium term, mainly due to high debt burden, low sales growth, higher primary energy and employee benefits expenses, as well as finance costs. The reality is that while Eskom generates adequate cash to meet its operational requirements, it has to borrow to service debt for the investment activities. Prioritizing financial sustainability and strengthening of the balance sheet while minimizing reliance on debt and government guarantees remain our priorities. In this regard, we are continuously reviewing our operational and capital expenditure to maximize savings and improve cash flows. We are mindful that to be able to achieve longer-term business and financial sustainability, a significant improvement in financial and business discipline is required. This all speaks to our long-term strategy, which we are in the process of redesigning. Coming back to the results of our audit, similarly, our position at interim reporting, there were no issues identified by the independent auditors to report in terms of the IFRS. A small win, looking at the emphasis of matter issued in the previous year. Sorry. That being the case, the auditors have, however, qualified the completeness of the information that is required by the PFMA on irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and losses due to misconduct. The qualification arose as a result of the following. Our procurement procedures generally did not comply with the PFMA. Some of our performance information in relation to addressing our previous PFMA queries could not be relied upon. The intensified cleanup led to further irregular expenditure being reported, and our focus on improving governance and embedding the processes, as well as ensuring that all requirements were adhered to from 2012, as I indicated earlier. This exercise relating to the last 2 points resulted in a significant increase in the number of reported irregular expenditure in 2018, as I said, from 3 billion to 19.6 billion, with many of these reported arising in prior years. We unfortunately also find ourselves in a position where we still do not know what we do not know. And as we further scrape the barrel, we could find other issues that could result in further irregular expenditure reported in the 2019 annual financial year statements due to transgressions from the past. I want to reiterate this point. Whilst a qualification may be seen as a regression following an emphasis of matter opinion that we got at interim reporting period, this should also be seen in the correct context. As at March 2017, we had an emphasis of matter relating to IFRS compliance compared to a clean audit now. The interim review did not include PFMA-related matters, which the current qualifications relate. And the mandate to clean up necessitated greater effort to surface and deal with all issues that predate the current board in order to ensure sustainable clean governance in the long term. Ladies and gentlemen, Eskom remains motivated to move forward to a successful future, to deliver on our commercial and developmental mandate, and to remain South Africa's trusted and credible electricity supplier. I want to reiterate the comments I made at the interim results announcement on the 30th of January this year. That I strongly believe that with the right governance structures at board and executive management level, the priority is entrenching financial and business discipline as a foundation to restoring the credibility and integrity of the utility with the financial markets. These are some of the key principles that are critical to stabilize, reform, and ultimately set Eskom up for a sustainable, successful future. As we share our annual results with you today, I would like to thank the board for their concerted effort in turning Eskom around, by making difficult decisions in the best interest of Eskom and of the country. My sincere gratitude goes to Pagamani for the excellent work he has done since joining Eskom end of January. Pagamani has a strong reputation in turning around organizations. In light of Eskom's current financial challenges, we are very fortunate to have someone of his caliber to steer Eskom towards achieving our vision for the future. I also wish to extend a particular word of thanks to those of our employees who had the courage to denounce the acts of wrongdoing they witnessed in this once great organization. Lastly, but importantly, to the more than 47,000 employees, Eskom Guardians, who are committed to keeping the lights on to power our great nation. Thank you for your resilience and professional outlook in the face of serious adversity. As a parting shot, I want to challenge us all to look at our results with a slightly different set of lenses. They represent a base for restoration and renewal. The damage was not done overnight, and so cannot be fixed overnight. We have to take some short-term pain to achieve long-term gains and the Eskom of the future that we all want to see. I will shortly ask Pagamani and his team to expand on the details of our annual results. However, before I do that, Minister, we have had to juggle the program a bit, Kulu, that we will let the results be presented, and after that, open to the media their questions, and then the Minister can then close. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention.
Maybe just a small correction on my part. And sometimes the chairman was talking about the quality of information that sometimes is being investigated. I had said the password was media and media. As you can see there, it's Franklin. Apologies about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kulu. The Minister of Public Enterprises, Mr. Gordon, the Chairman of the Board, board members that are here, executive of Eskom, media people that are here, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much to see us today. We are honored to have you here today. I want to start my presentation by a quote that's been used by quite a lot of people. It comes from Obama, where he says that we are the people who will change this place. We are the people that we have been looking for to change this place. We've been here for 5 months, and there are green shoots that we are beginning to see. They have been encouraging. But we know that the journey ahead is still too long. If you want to have a clear understanding of Eskom, you need to split it into 2 sections. We should have the pre-2018 January and the post-2018 January. When you go to pre-2018 January, you pick up an institution that was running business as usual. It was not clear what the priority was. Amidst the world that was facing severe challenges, where debt was supposed to increase from 382 billion to 600 billion in the space of 4 or 5 years, where EBITDA was 20%, which means we were borrowing to service our debt, where gearing was sitting at 72%, going to 78%. Those were the challenges that we were facing. But when you went through the corporate plan, the shareholder compact, it didn't create an impression that this was a priority. It left one with a feeling that somehow things will work out. Things will they'll solve themselves out. It was due to this that when the new board came in, it didn't take the corporate plan and the shareholder compact and say, let's look at this and let's activate. But they took a conscious decision. There was a feeling that the biggest problems that we have been facing are following the leadership and governance instability. And because of that, we needed to do things differently. That was the emphasis that we got. When the new board was appointed, it didn't work on business as usual. The priority was there. How are we going to clean up this place? How are we going to stabilize it? And if we can do these two things, we can then begin to talk about the long-term strategy of Eskom, the future of Eskom. And that demanded quite a lot because some of us had not had experience in the utility industry. But there are green shoots that began to show, smaller things that made us realize that we were on the right trajectory. For example, despite the challenges that we had during the financial year, you began to see the improving liquidity of an institution that could not access funding for 6 months. The operational performance continued to improve, and we'll talk about that. The control system and governance improved. We're not yet where we'd like to be, but there was progress. It was only then that we then started talking about the future Eskom. What kind of Eskom do we envisage? Of course, globally, all the utilities have been evolving because of the changing world. And somehow, we remain a bit behind as Eskom. But all those things that we were talking about, the action that was necessary, it became clear from us from the beginning that we need to be resolute, that we needed to take tough and decisive decisions if we are to change this institution. And that happened. The first thing was, how do you move a business from business as usual to transitioning it towards sustainability? We then look at the long-term strategy. What is the long-term strategy that informed Eskom over the past 10 years or so that is aligned to the shareholder compact that builds the corporate plan? It became clear to us that the last time Eskom had an integrated long-term strategy was 2010-2011, which therefore means that your corporate plan and your shareholder compact were skewed. And instead of pursuing the strategy, we then concentrated on operational issues, complying with the operational issues, tweaking. And an institution of this sort cannot be sustainable if you move away from the strategy and you concentrate on compliance. Yes, we've been good in compliance. BEE, we have the numbers. Women at the management, we have the numbers. Disabled people, we have those numbers. As crucial and as important as that was, but the truth of the matter is that you were sitting on the debt of 380 billion, which you're struggling to service, going to 600 billion. And on your EBITDA, you were sitting at about 72, going to 78. That was a challenge. And over and above that, we had the investors that were saying, we're not going to touch your paper. We tend to say that the demand for paper in Eskom stopped when we had a qualified audit report, which took place in 2017. That is not the case. In the past 5, 8 years, a number of investors that were very strong in Eskom were steadily moving out. We needed to bring them back. So, because of that, then you had this compounding poor performance that we faced. It came in different forms. Last year, it was a qualified audit report, allegations of corruption and mismanagement, and we appear not to be taking action on those. It was governance challenges. It was a negative investor sentiment. Amidst that space, when Eskom was facing these challenges, there was a statement that came from the Minister of DPE in June last year, which stated, the overall financial performance of the business had been good, with it designed to cost strategy showing positive results, as reflected by increase in revenue. You will see the numbers that are not talking about that. So, somehow, as we were operating, Eskom was operating in isolation of each other. The shareholder on the other side had his own views. The management on the other side had their own views. Everything was not planned. Now, this was bound to happen. It was bound to happen because we were in big, big trouble. How do you have 10 CEOs in 10 years? How do you have 6 boards in 10 years' time and still assume that all this would be achieved? What unfortunately happened is what was known as a corporate plan did not talk to the shareholder compact, and it did not talk to day-to-day operations of the business. So everyone was trying the least they could do. I am a South African, and I've had a privilege of working in government. I keep asking myself a question. Did I go through this procrastination? What did I do to assist Eskom? At least to raise the hand that things were not fair, that things had to change. If you're looking at an entity that had had a privilege of having 168 tariff increase in a space of 12 years, plus recapitalization to the tune of 83 billion, facing these challenges, surely I should have raised the voice. Surely I should highlight that there's something wrong, and this is structural. Same thing with the shareholder ministry. Same thing with the financial oversight of the National Treasury. Same thing with the policy ministry, which is DOE. The parliamentary committees that are in parliament. It should have been avoided. And we didn't do so. By the time the management went up to the president and said, things have to change, then we had the media that started coming forth and saying, things can't be allowed to operate the way they were operating. When investors decided, not in my name, I'm not going to invest, the horse has bolted. But we can still do a lot of work. Eskom is a resilient institution. It's a big institution. We need to be clear what is our shareholder compact. That informs the corporate plan, that informs our operations. And the Minister of DPE has highlighted that he wants to see a more informing, more detailed shareholder compact so that we can build the corporate plan which then feeds on our operations. And we have promised that by September, we'll have a document of that sort that combine all the operations of Eskom. Now, going back to what I've just highlighted, these are 7 key strategic targets for corporate plan of Eskom. Remember again, we are under duress financially. We are sitting with a huge debt. Your gearing is huge. Your EBITDA is not well. Your cash balance is less than 1%. Your debt balance is less than 3.5%. You are in trouble. Your debt to equity ratio is sitting uncomfortable at about 2.2%. But this is what we get. Yes, we can grow the economy by 2.1 local sales, 8% exports. We didn't grow we reduced the local 1.1. Export was 1.2. Primary energy, 43 billion. It was 5.3 that we achieved. CAPEX, we said we are going to optimize to an amount of 25 billion. We reduced CAPEX 56 to 47, which is better. Private sector participation, we didn't achieve our target, nothing at all. Reducing the government guarantee from 105 billion, we didn't reduce that. Digital and advanced analyticals to improve EBITDA by 6 billion, we saved 500 million. Connecting 1 million housing, we did well there. We managed to connect 215,000 houses, and we hope that by 2018, we'll have committed an additional 42,000. But this talks a normal institution that can operate on day-to-day basis. It doesn't talk about the institution that is struggling to raise money from the market, that has been begging government to recapitalize. Neither does it talk about the high costs that we've been facing and how we reduce that. And amidst this corporate plan, where we haven't done well, it then shows us the shareholder compact. But on the shareholder compact, we're doing well. We improved from 62 to 74. How do we do well on the corporate plan and not on the shareholder compact? There's a disconnection between those two again. And of course, as we all know, that the business operations are informed by a corporate plan and shareholder compact. One can't be successful at the expense of the other. When the president came, he raised key strategic issues on the SONA. He said, we need to strengthen governance and root out corruption. He said, we're going to remove board members from any role in procurement. That has been done here, where we have a board, BCT, board tender committee, which now oversees the responsibilities of what needs to be done. Review the funding, that's what we've been talking about. But what I'm trying to highlight is when the president moved up and said, these are things that should be done, the board followed through, and we are then begin to see those results. That is why then we needed to review our own corporate plan. So, the story goes like this then. January, a new board is appointed, and when that board is appointed, it doesn't pursue the corporate plan, but it started on a cleanup and stabilization. I like to make an example. Your house is destroyed by earthquake. You come, you want to fix the classes. You need to start with the structure. And that is what the board did. The board said, we're going to clean up this place. We're going to stabilize it. And once this has been done, we can then begin to talk about the future of Eskom. Where should it be? And that's where we are, as we are talking now. But again, the chairman has already alluded to that. Because of a number of responsibilities that we were facing, clean up this side, strategy this side, on the other side, doing the basics on the operational issues. It was felt that a 3-person team will do a much better job. And I've been happy with that because personally, it has allowed me a bigger space to look on the strategy side. Then the key decisions that the board made. Highest level of governance. We are not 100%, but we have covered a lot of ground. There was a case that went through. We were disappointed this year, which is the first one, but we're investigating. Purpose, mandate, powers of all subcommittees. We're reviewing the board charter so that we don't tick the box. This is also related to decision-making by board subcommittees, which has already been spoken about. Then the corporate plan. The board was clear with the management. We are not going to accept a 5-year program plan that exposes us to 600 billion when we can't service the 380 billion. Minister, we request permission that you allow us to have a 1-year corporate plan, and in September, we will submit a shareholder compact upon which we'll discuss and talk about the future of Eskom. That has been done. Included here, as you will see, is what needs to be done with regard to CAPEX and OPEX. Then we said, we're not only going to rely on tariffs. We're going to knock on the doors. We're going to maximize revenue. We're going to cut the cost so that we are able to reduce our debt, but also are able to ensure the sustainability of the institution. Sometimes we forget how big Eskom is and the role that Eskom plays in South Africa. Just running through this, you will see on GFCF, it contributed 6% in 2010, going to 10%. If Eskom had grown, let's say by 10%, can you imagine the impact it will have in the economy? Look on the other side on the GDP. We are contributing 2.1% on the GDP, and indirect is 5.1%. A 10% growth of Eskom will have a big impact on the economy. You can also look down here on SARS, contributing 1.3% on SARS. Direct and indirect, 5.4. We're sitting with a formidable institution that can create jobs, that can help this country move forward. But if, and only if, us who are involved here do the best they could, not just to turn around this institution, but to ensure that it is sustainable. An example of other utilities around the world, they have grown. Electrobus, 171%, 8% EDF. This is EBITDA. If you're talking NL, it's 69. We haven't done well. What could have been an impact if at least we grew that by 15, 16% or so? That is what should be at the back of our mind. Eskom is not about delivering electricity only. It's about an engine for growth and development in South Africa. And when we went through the IR issues, we all experienced that. So, what have we decided to do? As a board, we said, yes, we're going to clean up. We want to be a trusted, most trusted state-owned entity. We'll do this by being transparent and effective governance. That has been done. Not 100%, but it's been done. Address qualified audit, identified more irregular. The chair has already spoken. He presented it so well. We're happy with IFRs, but we haven't done well on the PFMA, but we have a time. We thought we'll clean this place within a short space of time. We're going to get more resources, and we're going to deal with this. Stabilization. EBITDA for the first time increased from 37.5% to 54% through savings. So we're heading closer and closer to 35%, which is our target, which will allow us to service our debt and capital. Liquidity, yes, we raised 57 billion from January. That's been a lot. And in this financial year, we raised 22% of the funding. We're reducing CAPEX and OPEX. We have identified the risks that we'll be taking. But We are an institution that is facing severe challenges. So we need to make and take decisions that are directly affecting us. If we don't do that, then Eskom will remain where it is. We have identified opportunities that are there in the market. 500 megawatts, which will give us roughly about 2.9 billion in 2 years' time. And we have signed 11 companies on this, and we are happy through that engagement because some of the clients were not working with us. Reducing arrear debt with municipalities, we have escalated it to the board, to the government. We said it was not only an Eskom issue. We've been to Parliament 7 times. There is a committee by ministers that is dealing with this. IMTT, interministerial task team that is helping us. The results have not been forthcoming and moving as quick as we would want, but we have elevated our story and we are bringing different layers into it. The coal price will remain a challenge. It's something that we have to look into. And it remains a challenge, but what we have invested, put some investment on our cost price, cost plus, and we are talking to them to look at the prices. The changes might not take as quick as we would like to see, but we are engaging with them. Optimize staff productivity levels. We've cut the CAPEX, we've cut the OPEX, we have the maintenance, we have identified opportunities that are there that will give us 2.9 billion. But over and above that, we have gone to the municipalities and worked with government. But all this is sufficient. It's not sufficient. We're looking at our own productivity levels in terms of the head count, in terms of the clients that we have per head, in terms of customers, in terms of distribution, in terms of transmission. We're looking to that so that we can come up with the best option. These are discussions that we are talking to a shareholder as we talk. The truth of the matter is, under the current construct, we are going to struggle. We need to enhance the productivity levels. Then ultimately, we need to talk about the Eskom of the future. And that is where the discussion is. We have had experts raising different views, how Eskom should be unbundled or bundled. We haven't reached that conclusion, but the debate is ongoing, and we hope you, as part and parcel of Eskom, are going to assist as we move forward with this issue. Now, the significance of what the board has done on the corporate governance. You will see, yesterday there were 9 implicated senior executives. There are 10 now. They've exited. 11 criminal cases open, 9 senior officials out. Outstanding disciplinary hearing of 1,049, of which 628 have been done and 75 employees have exited. 239 whistleblowing, which was never used before. 122 have been concluded and 67 confirmed gone. Remedial action of people that were doing business with Eskom, 25 of them, 7 have gone. Lifestyle audit, we're all doing that. There's work going on. Hopefully in the next 2 months it will be completed. Then we'll go to another level. Right now we're dealing with the first 2 levels. Irregular supplier contracts, those businesses that entered transaction in a dubious manner, all 5 of them were not doing business with, we have told them. McKinsey paid us 902 million. The interest of about 100 will be coming in. We'll be looking at 1 billion. We are moving forward. We are working with 8 regulatory bodies in trying to clean the place up. And those are National Treasury Procurement Investigation, Zondo Commission, Hawks SIU, Parliamentary Inquiry, National Director of Public Prosecutions, Standing Committee on Public Accounts, and SARS. They're all coming here. They all demand the information. We've been able to give that information. We have spoken about the qualification, where we've done well, where we haven't done well. With liquidity, again, spoken about it. We did indicate since the beginning of the year, we've raised 22 billion as we talk now. Out of 72 billion borrowing here, we're 22%. But what is important is two big transactions that we're about to conclude that will increase our holding, that is commitment to 62%. And we hope in 2 months' time will be 80%. And the plan is that we'll open the year with 34% borrowing. That is important for two things. One, the issue of the concern that was raised by the rating agencies becomes something of the past because the going concern will be covered. But secondly, the appetite and diversification of the funding will be coming in. We have spoken about the CAPEX and the OPEX that will be following through. But ultimately, our goal is to move very close to 35% of the EBITDA. Growth sales, we've spoken about that. Reduce area, we've spoken about that. Manage risk, we've spoken about that. Optimize productivity levels, we've spoken about that. But ultimately, we have to decide about the future of Eskom. We need to agree with the shareholder on the key policies that will derive us for us. We need to review the business model and see whether this remains relevant. Skills and capacity are important. We have to review that. But ultimately, we need new growth markets and products for us to grow this business as we move forward. So a number of decisions have been made, and we're beginning to see the benefits of those. It's not going to change overnight, but at least there's a commitment that we are beginning to see to the rest of the team that has been involved in this. The operational performance has done very well. I'll quickly just run through. If you are looking at generation plant, 77 to 73, that's an achievement. Particulate emissions, 0.30. Water usage has improved. Transmission, we've done very well. Distribution, we've done very well. Cypher, we've done well. Reviewed Medupi and Kusile dates. They were reviewed. Medupi has 3, and Kusile 1. We're expecting an additional 2 to Medupi Kusile in due course. And we have 2,510 MVWA that will be coming through transformation. Houses that have been built, we have spoken about those. More than 1 million households. And lost time injury rate is 0.23. Regrettable, we lost 3. We had 3 fatalities of our employees and 12 from contracts, which should have been avoided. BE business 80%, spend with black-owned businesses 45%. I'm highlighting. Sometimes we fail to tell our own story. That yes, there are challenges. That yes, our finances have to improve. But there are 47,000 employees here that have done an incredible amount of work. And that is why we have this power. And this is a period of 5 months or so. And we are confident that if we proceed with this trajectory, by the end of the year, we'll be sitting in a far better place. As you can see here, the EBITDA is moving, except the net loss of 2.3 billion on the financials. Net cash operations came down from 45 to 37. Liquid asset 22 billion against 33. We are in the right direction, but it will just demand that we put more effort. We seem to have somehow garnered and been able to identify key areas that will move us forward. And as we move forward, we will request our colleagues to help us. And I think the CFO can come and present the financials.
Thank you, Pakamani. Firstly, good morning to the Honorable Minister, Chairman, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. I think the Chairman and Pakamani have highlighted 3 key issues that we faced over the last financial year. The first was around liquidity, the ability of Eskom to meet its cash flow requirements. It was difficult following the qualification as well as the instability of leadership. Right up until December, I think the domestic markets were literally close to Eskom with the support of international financiers, in particular the DFIs, allowed us to meet our cash flow requirements through those difficult times. Following the new board appointment, we found that domestically sentiment's much more positive. That was coupled with the 20 billion bridge to bond loan, which was raised in February, and importantly, that needs to be repaid now at the end of August. The other challenge, as highlighted as well, was the qualification around the PFMA. Eskom did then embark on a program to address that qualification and highlight some of the activities that were undertaken. But on the back of this financial year having received a 2.2% tariff increase for FY18, it meant that Eskom had to focus on cost containment, and that is reflected in the results that I'll go into more detail at the moment. I think just to reiterate the importance is that as a state-owned company, Eskom needs to report in terms of financial reporting standards as well as the Public Finance Management Act. And like the chairman said, from an IFRS perspective, our income statement, our balance sheet and cash flow statement, there was no findings on that for March 2018. The findings come with regard to completeness around irregular expenditure, as well as fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and criminal conduct in terms of our PFMA reporting. We've touched on this slide in the chairman's speech as well as Pakamani, but I'm not going to go into more detail on that. Just maybe when I sum up at the end, I'll tell you what my views are in terms where I see Eskom going with regard to those items, in particular the going concern and our PFMA reporting requirements. So what is this 19.6 billion that the chairman has said, the increase from 3 billion to 19.6 billion? As highlighted, following the qualification last year in March 2017, the Eskom management had decided that let us go back and review all contracts that were open from April 2015, effectively being FY16, FY17, and then rolling into this financial year. Yes, we have done so. We've reviewed literally all those contracts. And in doing that, we then look back in terms of the compliance of that expenditure incurred relative to the requirements in terms of PFMA, triple PFA, etc. And what we've then reported in this financials is that, firstly, of the 19.6 billion, firstly, it's a group number. It does include our subsidiaries, and the main one being Eskom Rotec Industries, which contributes about 6 billion to the 19.6. Secondly, it's not that 19.6 billion of irregular expenditure was incurred in this financial year. As we try to demonstrate the phasing of that and which years it relates to, with a component belonging to prior to this financial year, FY18, of 7.5 billion, 5.5 billion being in this financial year, and then the last component of 6.5 billion, we've put it in more than 1 year. The reason for that is Eskom is still busy unpacking when that expenditure arose, whether it was in FY18 or prior to that, and we will do that during the course of this year. I think it's important that the chairman said in discussions with National Treasury, the Auditor General, it was agreed that we needed to go back as far as the 7th of December 2012 to assess our expenditure and whether we were compliant. We have done so in terms of what was practically possible up until this point. As part of our recovery, we will continue with that analysis for the remainder of this financial year. And like the chairman said, more information will be disclosed as and when we get to that point. But it is important to remember a lot of this irregular expenditure relates to non-compliance in terms of an administrative basis. It does not mean, firstly, that 19.6 billion is fruitless and wasteful, and Eskom did not receive any value therefrom. Secondly, it also does not mean that it is corrupt. As part of the investigations and the cases that Phakamani has highlighted, once we conclude on those disciplinaries and cases, if there are elements that then meet that criteria, we would then take the necessary actions, like we've done on the McKinsey to recover the 902 million, as well as the interest. So let me just highlight, and this is disclosing the details in our financials, note 51, on what makes up the 19.6 billion. Firstly, just to highlight the big amount around modifications of 6.5 billion. Effectively, that compliance says when Eskom has a modification to its operating contracts, if your deviation is either higher than 15% or 15 million rand, we need to then go, what it means is that if our deviation is 15 million or 15%, we need to report that to National Treasury. Eskom interpreted that as an and rather than the lower amount. So effectively, it meant that 6.5 billion of deviations that should have been reported to National Treasury previously between May 2016 and March 2018 was not done so. That's the amount that is being disclosed here. The second item is sole source. What it means here when Eskom wants to acquire and procure services or products and it's a sole source designation, we are required to get permission up front from National Treasury. And we had not done so during the course of this review period, and that's the amount that is disclosed under our sole source requirements in terms of our reporting of 4.8 billion rand. And maybe the other big item I want to touch on is under the triple PFA, of the 4.7 billion, 3.2 billion rand relates to Eskom being in a position to make sure its tax compliance certificates, in particular for foreign suppliers, where they have a domestic footprint, is available at the time of contracting, and what the review does reflect that this was not in place. Now, what we have done is that we've taken our procurement policy, we've reviewed it to align with the findings. We've taken that to National Treasury to get their support that we are now aligned to the latest legislative and policy requirements. That has been supported by National Treasury. We have now issued that to the business to make sure that we are compliant in terms of legislation. So I do expect that going forward, the amount of irregular expenditure which will be disclosed from Eskom will reduce, but as the chairman has alluded to, we are still busy with the cleanup, and that will come through in the financial year that we're currently busy with. So I think those are the key points around the irregular expenditure, but there's still work to be done. Included in that will be to improve our systems and processes from a procurement supply chain management, and where there are areas to automate, Eskom will do so to reduce the impact of human intervention. So from an income statement perspective, year on year, how has Eskom performed? As you can see on the revenue line, we're literally flat at 177 billion, being effectively the average price increase being neutralized by the lower volumes for the last financial year. And you will see that from a primary energy perspective, that we look to keep the cost escalations at or below inflation, which was a net 3% growth from 83 billion rand to 85 billion rand from 2017 to 2018. And then the reductions in costs come firstly from an employee benefits perspective, the drop of 33 billion to 29 billion, and the main reason and contributing factor there being that there is no provision for bonuses for the financial year 2018. From an operating cost perspective, the main factor for the reduction has been a revision in the provision of our decommissioning for power stations, and that has contributed to the drop in our operating costs from 24 to 18 billion rand. This then ultimately culminates to, from an earnings perspective, the 21% growth, which you will then see that below the line, that earnings is then eroded, which then results in a group loss of 2.3 billion rand, a drop from the 0.9 billion profit of March 2017. And the factors that influence that, as Eskom has commissioned and continues to commission its new assets, including Medupi and Kusile units, it means that more depreciation is then amortized to the income statement, and importantly that the finance costs, which was previously capitalized to these projects, now has to come through the income statement and is expense. That is why you see the growth in finance costs from 14 to 23 billion rand. Now, I think it's important that we continue to bring on these remaining units. We are targeting that for this financial year. So one can expect that below the line, more depreciation and more finance costs will come through Eskom's income statement for FY19, and also taking into account that FY19 has a 5.3% average tariff increase. So the pressure on our bottom line will continue for the remainder of this financial year before I see it stabilizing and then improving into the future. From a balance sheet perspective, the story is linked to the commissioning of our assets and new expenditure in terms of capital, which is funded by debt because of where our cash from operations are, together with a reduction in our liquid assets. So you will see that firstly, your liquid assets has dropped from 33 billion to 23 billion year on year, and then effectively the growth in property, plant and equipment of 42 billion from the 593 in FY17 to 635 in FY18 is funded through the growth in borrowings from 355 billion to 389, as well as other liabilities going up from 127 to 136. That is it from a financial position perspective. And then our cash from operations is important because your cash from operations is a very good indicator of one's financial health. You will see that debt has decreased from 46 to 38 billion year on year. And the bottom graph is presenting a reconciliation between what you see on the income statement of the 45 billion and our cash from operations, taking into account non-cash items and non-operational driven items. And what this then leads to is that as Eskom increases its debt, and based on our debt maturities, based on the amount of debt in our loan book, you see that our debt servicing commitment and costs have increased from 36 billion in 2017 to the 44 billion in 2018. So the importance is that with the decline in cash from operations, and it impacts on key financial indicators, in particular, you see your cash interest cover has dropped year on year from 1.7 to 1.22. And with regard to your debt service cover ratio, which includes interest and repayments, that has declined from 1.37 to 0.87 year on year. And as indicated by my CE, that your gearing has increased from 68 to 72%. So that is the negative trend in terms of our financial analysis and your financial indicators. From a capital expenditure perspective, yes, Eskom has looked at ensuring that we could be more efficient and looking to reduce the outflows in terms of capital expenditure. You will see that for the last financial year, that has dropped from 56 to 47 billion, with a large component of that linked to increasing your assets as well as maintaining the existing assets. And included in capital expenditure over the last year was 3.4 billion rand linked to electrifications and the 215,000 connections that was made during the course of the year. Arrear debts, Phakamani has touched on this. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but it is concerning. It has grown from 9.5 billion to 13.6 billion. Currently, we're sitting at around 15 billion in terms of municipal arrear debts. And you will also see that Soweto debt, including interest, is at 12 billion rand, as well as international arrears of 1 billion rand as at March 2018. But the initiatives with government and the interministerial task team is underway, and we look to find a solution for our arrear debts with regard to municipalities. Without repeating the issues around liquidity and going concern, as indicated by our chair, that the sentiment from the investor community has improved. And we are confident that we will execute on our 72 billion rand funding, as indicated by my CE, that transactions are imminent in terms of conclusions. So I think that's the positive. From a going concern perspective, I'd like to highlight there are two important decisions that the regulator will make before the financial year end. Firstly, with the regulatory clearing accounts of 32.7 billion, NERSA have indicated that they will determine that phasing at the end of September. Our understanding is that will then be phased in from April next year, depending on the number of years from a regulatory perspective. But I think secondly, we are aware that we are currently in a one-year price determination of 5.3. Eskom is on the verge of making its next revenue application to NERSA called MYPD4. It will be a 3-year application. So importantly, this means that by the time you get to around February next year, from a revenue perspective, Eskom should have the decision on the phasing of the RCAs plus the 3-year prices for MYPD4. And we believe that having that certainty, together with our cost focus, we'll be able to address the going concern emphasis of matter come March 19. So we've dealt with liquidity, we've dealt with going concern. The remaining issue is then to continue with the good work that we've done on the PFMA reporting, embed the disciplines and processes, as well as automate, together with, as the chairman said, we need the support from National Treasury at a point in time. We need to stop going back in the past and focus on going forward. That then puts us in a good space of then rectifying the qualification around the PFMA completeness. So that's the funding that we've spoken about. I think it's important to highlight that the 72 billion for this year is a bit of an anomaly due to the maturity of the 20 billion bridge to bond loan. Going forward, you will see that our funding requirements will be in the region of 50 billion per annum, which is closely linked to our capital expenditure that we're forecasting of around 45 billion per annum. So, Chair, I think in terms of summary, I would just sum it up as this last financial year, Eskom had to focus on keeping our head above water and not putting unnecessary pressure on government. We believe that with the new board, the minister, we've managed to achieve that. The next year, the year we're in, will still remain tough before we start stabilizing the organization. And now if I can hand over to Pakamani to summarize the conclusion.
Okay, Eskom releasing financial results for 2017-2018. I guess in a nutshell, they said they made some difficult choices and decisions in order to turn around this organization. But something coming out of the power utility reporting irregular expenditure of 19 billion rand.
And that's quite a big amount. And the chairperson, Mr. Jabu Mabuza, was saying, remember, we still don't know what we don't know. We're still scraping the barrel, and some more stuff could still come out.
In terms of their long-term strategy, they say it's in the process of being redesigned. And I guess they're saying these results form part of the basis of a restoration and a sort of renewal for the organization. Well, that was the announcement of Eskom's financial results at Megawatt Park in Midrand, Johannesburg. The power utility has reported, as we've been reporting, a net loss of, before tax, of 2.6 billion rand for the reported period and irregular expenditure of 19 billion rand since 2012.
Eskom board chairperson Jabu Mabuza says they're still investigating corruption and maladministration to establish how much more money the organization might have lost over the past few years. He conceded that Eskom was facing one of its toughest times.
We reported at the year ended March 2017 irregular expenditure